What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Here we are with another reaction video. In this one we have why Britain is the center of the world. That's actually crazy to think about. Like, they've had the largest empire in the history of the world, and they're actually the center of the world. Before we dive into this video and find out why, if you happen to enjoy it, please don't forget to subscribe and give the video a thumbs up. And let's figure out this conundrum.
Here it is. Here's the original one. I think there's this misnomer that my orange coat is dead, but no, it's just dying quickly. There's just a good amount of this going on. But I think this thing has a couple more years for sure. So, this is my desk. I sit here all day and I work and I look at this map whenever I'm daydreaming. I just look at this map. I bought this map off eBay and it was in like an elementary school and now it's in my office. I notice something every time I look at it that kind of irks me. That something is this. This zero. This zero, which is not just one number, but it's actually a corresponding line that looks like this.
Why is this the center of the world?
Let's back up here for a second. The Earth is divided into lines.
Yes, this is true.
Sometimes they're curved like they are on my map. And whether or not they're curved or straight has to do with this concept of projection, which I'm not going to talk about here. I've talked about plenty using a knife and a globe back in an old Vox video that I made. But just know that the Earth is divided up into lines, latitude and longitude lines, ones that go up and down and ones that go from side to side. All of these lines in the grid have a number associated with them. So for the up and down lines, there's a 0 point, and then anywhere to the right of that or east of that starts to go up from 0 to 180 with a little E next to it for east of the 0 line. And then everything to the left or the west of it has the same thing, 0 to 180 with a W for west. Okay, that center point is the 0 point from which all east and west things are measured.
Yes.
The same thing for these side-to-side lines. If you go up from here, you're going to start to get higher and higher until you get to 180 degrees north. Or if you go south, you will go 180 degrees south, which is the South Pole.
Okay.
Finding out where the 0 point should be for these horizontal lines is actually quite easy. The Earth has these two natural poles, which make for a natural top and bottom of the Earth. And halfway in between those two poles, you have this perfect center point, the equator, which is a very natural place to put this 0 point and to measure everything from. The up and down lines are totally arbitrary where you decide them. Like, who's to say that, like, it couldn't be right here in Russia and this could be 0 and everything could go west and east from here? Or Japan, for that matter. Well, in fact, a long time ago, that's how it used to be.
Really?
These maps with these grids were really, really important for navigating the world, and so everyone had to choose a 0 point. And most would just make their capital or their home base the 0 point. If you lived in
I guess that makes sense because that's like your home base, your capital. So really that's when going out to trade or travel and find another land or whatever, that's your starting point. So to make the 0 like your home base, I guess it does make sense in a way to me because that's your starting point and then you're leaving. Okay.
Japan, you would just make Japan the 0 point and the rest of the coordinates would be measured against that 1 0 point, which was Japan. And same if you lived in France or Washington, D.C. This was fine because back then countries kind of just fought wars and competed with each other. They weren't really collaborating or aligning or trading as much as they do today. And so everyone could just have their own maps centered around their place, and they did just fine. But then, around the 1800s, a few things started to happen that completely changed everything. First, countries and empires, instead of just competing and fighting with each other, started to actually say, like, we should align with each other and trade and be friends because that's better for everyone. Pair this with the fact that map making and sea navigation was becoming like a big industry. It was no longer just the king ordering maps to be made for their like expeditions, but now it was like private businesses going out and doing things that private businesses do.
Make money.
And so there was now like a demand.
Make money and make it by any means necessary. That's what private businesses do.
For good seafaring maps. In short, map making was trending. Seems like a pretty good time to be alive. Okay, and there's one more thing that was happening around this time that was super important, which is this. Trains everywhere. Trains were just like popping up everywhere. And trains were also trending.
Industrial revolution.
People were now able to travel like across the country, not just like on their horses, but on this whole
shout out Britain for them trains.
System of trains where you could buy a ticket, get on a train, and end up somewhere hundreds of miles away. And you know what trains run on, besides coal, is time. Timetables, schedules. How do you know when your train's gonna arrive, and when it's gonna leave, and when it's gonna get there? Time. Some universal set time. The problem is, back in the 1800s, there was no universal set time. Check out this piece of paper. Today, all of these cities and towns would be just on Eastern Standard Time, one time zone. But back then, every town had their own time, depending on when it was noon for them. If they were a little bit east or a little bit west of here, that would be different than in Washington, D.C.
Jesus.
Total nightmare for trains.
Yeah, that's chaotic.
The lifeblood of trains is time.
Yeah.
And this time mishmash just wasn't going to work. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with this? Look at this guy. You probably don't know who this person is. I didn't know who this person was. He was the US president that no one remembers. This US president in the late 1800s saw a problem with all of this. He realized that having a bunch of different maps with a bunch of different 0 points based on whoever was making it was a problem. And he realized that not having a universal time zone or some sort of universal way of making the same time for everyone was also a problem. So he invited 41 countries to come here to Washington, D.C., where I live, and to sit around and think and talk about where this 0 point should be. Where should the center of the world be so that we can measure time as well as navigation, all maps.
I'm glad they came together and figured this out, because all of those towns being on different time zones, like, that's absolutely insane. And I can understand why that would be an absolute nightmare for trains. That's an absolute nightmare to me. And it don't affect me. It wouldn't affect me, but I'm sure it would at some point. But it'd be an absolute nightmare to me, much less something that runs off of time. That's crazy.
Maps could be normalized to this one spot. So after a moment of a bunch of white dudes sitting around in a room in Washington, D.C., which is kind of what's happening today in Washington, D.C., they came to a vote. And that vote, almost unanimously, said that the 0 line should be right here.
There you go.
This line, if you zoom in, goes right through London, England. It actually goes through a little outskirts town called Greenwich. Greenwich is the home of the Royal Observatory of the British Empire. This would be the place where the prime meridian, or the 0 point for the entire world, east and west, would start. Every country at the conference agreed that this should be the case, except for the Dominican Republic, at that time called Santo Domingo. They said no. They were the one country that didn't like this proposal. And France and Brazil actually abstained diplomatically, which was kind of them saying like, oh, we don't agree with this. France continued to make their maps with Paris as the center point, but eventually they got on board as well. So that gets to the crux of my big question of why the Z.
I feel like as a country, even if you didn't agree with it at a certain point, if everybody else around you agreed with it, and that's how everybody else was making maps, at a certain point you got to join in, because your map is the only different map. And look, so people aren't going to base things off your map when every other country is telling them this is a map, so you got to jump in and join.
0 right there, which is a bunch of people voted on it. But why were they so down with Britain having the 0 point being in the center of the world? Well, the answer is because it was 1884, and Britain was just really good at the ocean. Yeah. The British Empire was by far the biggest, most powerful navy. They had the most experience with maps and ocean faring. And so it was kind of a natural choice to let Britain, the king of the ocean, have this center point. And from then on, maps started to be drafted with Greenwich, this royal observatory, as the center point for the east-west divide in the world. Over time, this exact point, exactly where it's drawn, has shifted a tiny bit because of better tools to measure things, and so it's actually not literally on the Royal Observatory anymore, but it's effectively in the same place that was drawn in this 1884 conference. But they also established that all time in the entire world would be measured against this same spot, Greenwich. Noon at Greenwich, at the Royal Observatory, would be the peg against which all other time was set. They called this Greenwich Mean Time. So you end up getting a map that looks like this. Zoom in and you see Greenwich is right here. That's GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Okay. You go west of here and you start to get GMT -1 or -2, -3. You can come all the way back to the east coast of the United States, and this time zone is Greenwich Mean Time -5 right now. Sometimes it's -4 if there's daylight savings, and daylight savings is dumb and whatever. But you get the idea. The more you go west, you go back from Greenwich Mean Time. If you go east, it's the opposite. You go forward to Greenwich Mean Time. So if it's noon at Greenwich, then this next time zone, it'll be 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., etc. So these time zones have been marked up in these...
Thank God they came together and figured out these time zones, because the world, it was obviously a chaos with the time zones they had going on at the time. So this made things a lot more simple, a lot easier for everyone involved.
Kind of strange shapes. Eventually, if you go 12 steps away from Greenwich, 12 time zones, you'll end up here at this mess. This mess is the International Dateline. This is where Greenwich Mean Time +12 or -12 ends up at this line, which is where a new day starts. So let me give you an example of what this would look like. Imagine it's 4 p.m. in Greenwich, England, right here at this Royal Observatory. It is 4 p.m. GMT on May 28th. If anyone wants to send me a birthday gift, May 28th. May 28th. It's May 28th at 4 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Sitting, chilling in the Royal Observatory, which I've never actually been to. I need to go to the Royal Observatory. I'm going to do that this year, next year, at some point. Okay,
there you go.
So it's 4 p.m., May 28th. Across the ocean here in Washington, D.C. at that time, you can see that we go from 4 p.m. -5, so 11 a.m. Okay, so it's 11 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. at that exact time on May 28th. Head across the United States to the west coast of the United States to Seattle or Portland, and right there it's 3 hours earlier than it is here. You're now at 8 a.m. So it's 8 a.m. here, it's still 4 p.m. in Greenwich. It's still 4 p.m. in London. Now you head into the Pacific Ocean, keep going west until you get to French Polynesia, at which time it's 5 in the morning. You're now GMT -11, it's 5 in the morning. And then you get right up to this messy line. If you were to be in the Baker Islands, which is like a US, like random uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you would be at 4 a.m. So it's 4 p.m. over in Greenwich, it's 4 a.m. on this random island in the Pacific. So then cross this messy looking line, it's still 4 a.m., but now it's the next day. It's May 29th at 4 a.m. Here in Fiji, at the same time, 4 p.m. at Greenwich, it's now 4 a.m. the next day, May 29th. So we went from being 12 hours behind Greenwich to being 12 hours in front of Greenwich just by going over this international date line.
That's crazy.
You could do this exact same thing going the other way. Start heading east and you see that it's 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Head all the way over into Asia, and now you're getting closer to seeing how that 4 a.m. happens when you get over to Fiji.
That's why.
Now, the caveat to all of this is, of course, is that some of these countries switch by an hour for like daylight savings type things and whatever. But ignore that. Imagine there wasn't daylight savings. Right now, in this moment, where daylight savings is at least ended in the United States, this holds across the whole world. Someday I'll make
that's absolutely like insane to me. This is absolutely mind blowing. Because I didn't know about the international date line. I ain't gonna lie to y'all. You can call me dumb, throw whatever comments you want at me, but I didn't know. And you don't know what you don't know. And I think this is really cool. I understand different time zones, different countries are a day ahead. I knew that, but I didn't know this is how it was broken down.
A video about this whole messy debacle. But the point of all of this is to say that because of this conference in 1884 to reconcile train timetables and to make maps more uniform, we now have this navigation and time system that rules our whole world, and Britain is just sitting at the center of it, of course. The British Empire may have fallen and the world has moved on from Britain being the center of the world in a lot of ways, but it's still technically the center of the world in a lot of ways. I'm gonna put some links in the description for some of these cool tools that kind of help visualize time zones if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, my question has been answered. I actually didn't know the answer to this question, and I went on a deep dive, and now I know. So now I'll sit at my desk.
There you go.
And I will know the answer to why it's 0, and I think that was worth it. So thanks.
I think that was
big thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this.
We're gonna skip the sponsor, but yeah, that was cool. I guess that was an interesting fact to find out. I didn't know how the time zones were created or anything like that. So and of course UK decided what it was gonna be because UK ran ish at the time. UK was like, hey, we the best Navy, we done did the most traveling, we got the best sailors, so we gonna be the 0 point. Everybody like, oh, you right, UK, you right, y'all got the 0 point. And then you had a couple countries that was like, no, we in the Dominican Republic, no, we disagree. And then a couple who abstained was like, we don't agree, we'll keep doing things our way. But eventually they switched up and everybody had to make it that way. So that is why Britain is at the center of the world. Point blank period. If you guys learned anything new in this video, drop it down in the comment section. I want to hear it because everything I learned in this video seemed like it was new information to me. And that's why I love learning about new stuff. I love that. That's all we have. If you guys enjoyed that, don't forget to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and check out the next one. You're going to enjoy it. See you guys next time.